What would you do if, after buying your dream home, a complete stranger stepped onto your land and told you it wasn't really yours? That was the first taste of insanity I got when I moved to what I thought would be a peaceful, rural escape. No traffic, no suffocating city ordinances, and most importantly, no HOA breathing down my neck. I envisioned quiet mornings on my porch, acres of open land stretching in every direction, and the kind of freedom I had never experienced in the city. For the first time in years, I could finally breathe. That illusion shattered the moment I pulled into my driveway. She was there, standing dead center in the road like a self-appointed gatekeeper, arms crossed, clipboard in hand, and an expression so smug it made my blood pressure spike on sight. I barely had time to step out of my truck before she pounced. "This road is for residents only," she snapped. I frowned, slamming my door shut. "Yeah? Well, I live here. This is my driveway." Her lips pressed into a thin line, her grip tightening on her clipboard. "All roads in this community fall under HOA jurisdiction. You need to submit a request for access like everyone else." I let out a short laugh. "This road was built by the previous owner. It's private property. The HOA has nothing to do with it." Karen, because of course her name was Karen, tapped her pen against the clipboard, unfazed. "That's not what our community guidelines state. If you don't comply, we'll have to take action." I should have seen the warning signs right then and there. I should have known that Karen wasn't just some pushy neighbor with too much free time, she was a problem. But I made the mistake of waving her off, turning my back on her threats. That night, I slept soundly, thinking it was over. The next morning, I realized just how wrong I was. The next morning, I stepped outside, stretching as I took in the crisp country air. For the first time in a long while, I felt at peace, until I looked down the driveway and felt my stomach drop. Gleaming metal teeth jutted from the ground, right in front of my truck. At first, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. Maybe it was a trick of the light, maybe I was imagining things. But as I walked closer, reality set in. These weren't cheap, makeshift obstacles. These were industrial-grade spike strips, bolted into the pavement on my own damn property. The kind designed to shred tires in seconds, like something straight out of a high-speed police chase. I felt my hands tighten into fists. This wasn't just petty HOA nonsense. This was a crime. Without wasting a second, I yanked out my phone and started snapping pictures from every angle. If Karen thought she could intimidate me into submission, she had grossly underestimated the kind of day I was willing to have. Still gripping my phone, I marched straight to her house, my boots thudding against the pavement with each furious step. I didn't bother knocking. Instead, I hammered my fist against her door so hard that her windows rattled. Moments later, it swung open, and there she was, calm as ever, sipping her morning coffee like she hadn't just committed felony-level sabotage in the middle of the night. "Can I help you?" she asked sweetly, tilting her head. I pointed furiously toward my driveway. "Are you out of your mind? You put spike strips in front of my house." Karen took another slow sip of coffee, completely unfazed. "I did warn you," she said, as if that somehow justified it. I stepped closer, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "This is criminal damage to property, not to mention completely unsafe. What if an emergency vehicle needed to get through?" She shrugged. "Rules are rules. If you have an issue, take it up with the HOA board." I nearly laughed at the sheer absurdity of it all. She had literally booby-trapped my driveway, and she thought she could hide behind a set of arbitrary neighborhood rules? I took a deep breath. "Oh, don't worry, I will. But not the way you expect." Because what Karen didn't know was that I had a lawyer on speed dial. Before doing anything else, I made sure to document everything, the placement of the strips, how deep they were bolted into the ground, even the smug look on Karen's face as she stood there, watching me gather proof. This wasn't just some overzealous HOA stunt, this was intentional. Then, I made a single phone call. "You've got to be kidding me," Ethan Carter, my lawyer, said after I sent him the photos. "I wish I was," I gritted out. "Can she actually get away with this?" Ethan let out a sharp laugh. "Not a chance. This is property damage, reckless endangerment, and illegal road obstruction. You want me to handle it?" "Absolutely," I said. "Make her regret every second of it." By the time I got home that evening, Karen had already received an official legal notice, the kind that made it clear this wasn't just some petty HOA dispute. This was a lawsuit waiting to happen. And sure enough, the moment I pulled into my driveway, I spotted her outside, grumbling under her breath as she angrily yanked the spike strips out of the ground. She knew she had no legal ground to stand on, and now, under the threat of a real lawsuit, she had no choice but to comply. But as satisfying as it was to watch her struggle, I knew she wasn't done. Karen wasn't the type to take a loss gracefully. If anything, she was just getting started. That night, I was jolted awake by a loud bang outside. My heart pounded as I grabbed my flashlight and rushed to the porch. I swept the beam across my driveway. My truck was still there, untouched. But when I aimed the light at the road, my stomach dropped. The spike strips were back. Only this time, she had reinforced them with concrete. I stood there, gripping my flashlight so hard my knuckles ached, staring at the sheer level of insanity in front of me. She hadn't just put the spike strips back, she had cemented them into the ground. The jagged metal teeth gleamed under the moonlight, embedded deep in a thick layer of fresh concrete, right at the entrance to my driveway. I let out a slow breath, forcing down the urge to march to Karen's house and tear that smug grin off her face. Instead, I did what any sane person in my position would do, ***, I documented everything, ***. More photos, more proof. I made sure to capture every inch of that illegal death trap before storming back inside and dialing Ethan again. "She did what?" His voice was groggy, probably half asleep, but when I sent the pictures, he was wide awake. "Jesus Christ, Jake, this isn't just a nuisance lawsuit anymore. This is deliberate sabotage." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Tell me we can shut this down." "Oh, we're going beyond shutting it down," Ethan said, his tone sharp. "She's actively creating a hazard, obstructing a private driveway, and ignoring legal warnings. I'll file for an emergency injunction first thing in the morning. But in the meantime, be careful. She's escalating." And he wasn't wrong. Because by the time the sun rose, Karen was already outside, ***, arms crossed, watching, waiting ***. The spike strips were still cemented in place, but she wasn't even trying to hide it this time. She wanted me to see. She wanted a reaction. I stepped toward her, my voice dangerously low. "Karen, I don't know what kind of fantasy world you live in, but this is private property. You can't just keep sabotaging my driveway." She smirked, tapping her clipboard. "Community rules apply to everyone." I pulled out my phone, already dialing. "I don't need permission. This is my land, and since you refuse to listen, maybe it's time someone bigger than me gets involved." For the first time, her smug expression faltered. And when the sheriff's deputy and a legal team arrived within the hour, she knew she was in trouble. But Karen wasn't done. By that afternoon, I found a fresh set of letters in my mailbox, bills. HOA fees. Hundreds of dollars in fines. I skimmed through them, my blood boiling as I read the ridiculous charges. Unauthorized use of private roads, $250. Failure to comply with community guidelines, $500. Special assessment for road maintenance, $750. I laughed, a cold, disbelieving laugh, before storming back inside. This was her next move. If she couldn't physically block me from using my own driveway, she'd try to financially strangle me into submission. A few hours later, Ethan called again. "I just got word from the county office," he said. "HOA tried to file paperwork to take control of your road." I stopped mid-step. "You're kidding." "I wish I was. But the request was denied, because they don't own your land, but they're trying, Jake. They're trying to find a way to claim jurisdiction over your property." It was pure desperation, but it was also dangerous. Karen wasn't just an annoying neighbor anymore, she was actively conspiring to take my land away, I knew better than to assume she would stop. She was obsessed. And I was right. Because the next morning, my water was cut off. When I called the utility company, they told me the HOA had reported my home as non-compliant with community maintenance standards. I almost dropped the phone. "You're telling me the HOA, who has no legal control over my property, just shut off my water?" The customer service rep hesitated. "Well, technically, they just filed a request for review, but that put your account on hold. You'll need to get HOA approval to restore service." I nearly laughed. Karen had actually weaponized my utilities against me. Storming out the door, I made a beeline for her house. I didn't bother knocking. I pounded on her door, hard enough to rattle the frame. She opened it with that same infuriating smile, sipping her coffee. I gritted my teeth. "Turn it back on." She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about." My fists clenched. "The water. You know exactly what you did." Karen let out a dramatic sigh, tapping her clipboard. "Look, if you're struggling, I'm sure the HOA board would be willing to discuss a resolution, as long as you agree to the rules like everyone else." My vision went red. She was actually trying to blackmail me into joining the HOA. I took a deep breath, stepping closer, lowering my voice. "Listen carefully, Karen. You're playing a dangerous game. You think you have control, but you don't. And you're about to learn that the hard way." For the first time, I saw it, hesitation, just a flicker. Because she knew. She knew she had pushed too far. And I was about to push back. Karen had been relentless, but what I didn't realize was that the spike strips, the fake fines, and even cutting off my water were just the beginning. She wasn't satisfied with making my life miserable, she wanted me gone. I learned that the hard way when I checked my mail the next morning and found a notice taped to my front door. Notice of violation, failure to maintain property in accordance with community standards. Failure to remedy will result in HOA action. I read it twice, my heart hammering. HOA action? I wasn't even in the damn HOA. Storming back inside, I called Ethan. The moment he picked up, I read the notice to him. There was silence on the other end before he muttered, "That sneaky, manipulative." He cut himself off, sighing. "Jake, they're trying to classify your house as abandoned or neglected so they can claim ownership through an HOA foreclosure." I nearly dropped my phone. "You're telling me they're trying to steal my house?" "That's exactly what they're doing," Ethan said grimly. "And if they succeed, they can sell it off for a community betterment project or some other HOA nonsense. I need you to check your records, see if you've had any suspicious citations or fines from the county recently." I didn't have to check, I knew the answer. Those fake HOA fines. Karen had been building a paper trail, setting me up to look like a delinquent homeowner. If I hadn't called Ethan when I did, I might have woken up one day to find a bank or a development company suddenly owning my land. But the worst part? She wasn't doing this alone. That afternoon, I noticed Karen going door to door, clipboard in hand, speaking in hushed tones with the neighbors. She was gathering signatures. I stepped onto my porch, watching as she stopped at old Mr. Peterson's house. He listened, nodded, and hesitantly scribbled something on the clipboard before Karen shot me a triumphant glance. She was lobbying support. That night, an emergency HOA meeting was announced. I showed up, not because I believed in their ridiculous power plays, but because I knew I needed to fight back before it was too late. The community center was packed. Karen stood at the front, flipping through stacks of papers like a prosecutor preparing for trial. Her voice rang through the room, sharp and commanding. "This man is a threat to our community," she declared, her eyes burning with self-righteous fury. "He refuses to abide by the rules. He disrespects our values. And now he's dragging us through legal battles and law enforcement disputes, all because he thinks he's above the law." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Then, someone cleared their throat. The HOA president, Mr. Caldwell, adjusted his glasses. His voice was calm but firm. "Karen," he said, "are you seriously suggesting that you're the victim here? After you installed spike strips, cut off his water, and tried to fine him for rules that don't even apply to his house?" Karen stiffened. "It was necessary to enforce our standards. We can't have outsiders." "Outsiders?" Another resident cut her off. "Jake lives here, Karen. He owns his land. You're abusing your power." For the first time, Karen's confidence wavered. She looked around, clearly expecting support, but instead, she was met with cold stares. She had pushed too far. By the end of the meeting, a motion was passed. Karen was officially stripped of her HOA authority. No more clipboard. No more fines. No more bullying. But Karen? She didn't go down without a fight. That night, as I sat on my porch, finally enjoying a well-earned moment of peace, I saw her silhouette moving down the street. She was knocking on doors, gesturing wildly as she spoke, her voice carrying through the night air. She was furious. "You're all turning against me after everything I've done for this community?" she shrieked. "You think he belongs here?" Across the street, old Frank Harrison shook his head. "Karen, you've made this place miserable for years. We're done." Her face twisted into something ugly. Then, suddenly, her eyes locked onto mine. Like a predator spotting its last hope of survival. She stormed toward my property, fists clenched. "This isn't over," she spat. "You think you can just walk in here and ruin everything? I'll make sure you regret this." I stayed where I was, arms crossed. "Karen, you're trespassing. Walk away before you make things worse." She sneered. "Oh, you haven't seen worse yet." And with that, she stormed off into the night. I had a sinking feeling she wasn't bluffing. I woke up the next morning to an unsettling silence. For the first time in weeks, Karen hadn't made her presence known. No passive-aggressive notes taped to my door, no surprise HOA fines, no smug glances from across the street. For a brief moment, I almost let myself believe that she had finally accepted defeat. Then I stepped outside and saw my driveway was empty. My truck was gone. Panic surged through me as I scanned the area. Had it been stolen? Did I leave it somewhere? But deep down, I already knew the answer. Racing back inside, I pulled up my security footage, fast-forwarding through the night until, there she was. Karen. Standing beside a tow truck, arms folded, watching with a satisfied smirk as the driver hauled my vehicle away. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. She had gone too far. Grabbing my phone, I dialed the sheriff. "I need to report a stolen vehicle," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "And I know exactly who took it." Within 15 minutes, a patrol car pulled into my driveway. The deputy stepped out, rubbing his temples. "Let me guess," he sighed. "Karen?" I just held up my phone, playing the footage. He watched, his frown deepening. "This is bad," he muttered. "She had no legal right to do this. Any idea where they took it?" I already had a suspicion. "There's a private impound lot 5 miles from here. If she used her HOA connections, that's probably where it is." The deputy nodded. "Let's go get your truck back, and while we're at it, let's have a little talk with Karen." 15 minutes later, we pulled up to the lot. And sure enough, there was my truck, locked behind a chain-link fence. A grizzled man in greasy coveralls stepped out of a small office. "Something I can help you with?" he grunted. "Yeah," the deputy said. "This truck was illegally towed from private property. We're here to get it back." The guy scratched his beard. "HOA lady said it was unauthorized." I stepped forward, cutting him off. "Unauthorized according to who? I have legal proof this driveway isn't under HOA control." The man sighed. "Look, I don't want trouble. If you've got proof, I'll release it, but you'll have to pay the impound fee." The deputy shook his head. "Not happening. That truck should never have been taken. If you want to avoid charges for illegal repossession, I suggest you waive the fee." The guy held up his hands. "Fine, fine. Take it. Just keep that crazy woman away from me." With my truck back, there was only one thing left to do. We made a direct stop at Karen's house. She opened the door already smirking, but that didn't last long. The moment she saw the deputy beside me, the color drained from her face. "Karen," the deputy said firmly. "We need to talk." She tried to play dumb. "Oh? About what?" I hit play on my phone, the footage of her standing beside the tow truck as my vehicle was hauled away. I locked eyes with her. "You stole my truck, Karen. That's grand theft auto." Her eyes widened. "It wasn't theft. It was a community enforcement action." The deputy crossed his arms. "The HOA has no authority over private property. You committed a felony, and now you're going to pay for it." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "No, this is ridiculous. You can't do this." The deputy ignored her protests, grabbing her hands and cuffing them behind her back. "Karen, you're under arrest for vehicle theft. You have the right to remain silent." She thrashed as he read her rights, but the best part? The entire neighborhood had come out to watch. Some whispered, others recorded on their phones, capturing the downfall of the woman who had terrorized them for years. I crossed my arms, watching with satisfaction as she was led toward the patrol car. "Told you this wasn't over, Karen." She twisted around, glaring at me with pure hatred. "You'll regret this. I'll get a lawyer. I'll sue you." I leaned casually against my truck. "Good luck with that. I already have a lawyer, and he's a lot better than yours." With Karen officially out of the picture, the HOA scrambled to distance themselves from her. They released formal statements, claiming they had no involvement in the illegal towing incident, but the damage was done. Her reign of terror was over. She was stripped of her HOA membership, slapped with multiple charges, and forced to pay thousands in legal fees. And most importantly, she was no longer my problem. As I stood there, looking at my clear, spike-free driveway, I took a deep breath. Because finally, I had won. But it does make you wonder. Have you ever felt powerless against HOA, or Karen, rules? Share your experiences below, let's see who had it worse.